This is Geek Gab with your host, John and me, Daddy Warpig. We are back. Geek Gab for Saturday, October 6th, 2018. And we are here today to bring you news of the best new movie of this modern age. For I have gone forth and seen Venom, and have returned to tell you, our audience, about precisely how awesome it is. I will not tell you it's any more awesome than it is, and I will not tell you it's any less awesome than it is. I will tell you precisely how awesome it is, but before I do, John, how was your week?
Hey, Daddy Warpig. It was a good week. What can I say? I finished up that board game retreat in the mountains, and it was a glorious, glorious weekend.
Yeah, because we were talking about that last weekend.
While I was there, we had to suspend our game of Terraforming Mars, and they all went and played Power Grid while I joined us here at the show.
I got killed in Power Grid the last time I played that.
Power Grid's a wonderful game if you like arithmetic. Do you like doing arithmetic?
No, wait, that's not true. The last time I played Power Grid, I was almost in first place. I clawed my way up from dead last to almost first place. So that's not actually getting killed. That's an accomplishment, is actually my opinion is. If you start off in the very first turn, you're presented with a lot of disadvantages, but you fight your way up to second place in a table of 6. That's not bad. That's not a shame. You didn't win, but you still got up to second. That's a victory, in my opinion.
That's very good. And one of the cool things about Power Grid is that it's designed for that. If you are in the back, if you're losing, you have small advantages during the next turn, so that you can. It's sort of like a rubber band effect. So because you were able to vault your way to second place, maybe you didn't win, but it means that you successfully used the mechanics of the game to get to that position. You don't just get handed second place. You took your position and you made the best of it, and that's a good Power Grid gamer.
One of the things about Power Grid that enables you to get up to the front, if in the right circumstances, as the game goes on, energy gets more and more expensive. Just a function of how the game works. If you are cursed with some inefficient power plants because of bad draws or whatever, those power plants have a greater fuel requirement. So you have to spend more to get fuel from them. But they also have a greater fuel capacity. So if you spend more, you can store double the fuel for this turn and next turn. And what that means is that if you're willing to spend the money and you have a little bit of money, you can spend extra money, fill up all your power plants with fuel, and then either deny fuel entirely to the next guys because you've cornered the market, or make it so expensive that they can't afford it.
And that's what the last 2 turns are really notorious for. That everybody has to stop and say, hold on, I need to do some math.
Yeah.
We actually like to play they made a card game version of Power Grid, which you might appreciate this. It's got all the fun of the resource market of Power Grid and the power plants. It's got all the fun power plants. But it doesn't have that obnoxious board where you have to spend $20 to get to a new city or anything like that. So
it's difficult.
Yeah, it adds a layer of complexity, but when you take that layer of complexity away and you're left with the bidding game, that mind game, and the resource market, you realize those are the 2 fun parts of the game.
Yes. Yeah, the map kind of gets in the way.
I think so. But the map also adds some interesting things, because the original map was in Germany, and they made a bunch of maps of other countries, and those countries sort of imply the different resource markets. France is very heavy into nuclear power in the world, so
yes,
if you play on the French map, nuclear power is a lot cheaper. There's even a North Korea, South Korea map where at the beginning of the game you have to choose which market you're in. You can't cross markets. You either have to play South Korea or you have to play Best Korea.
I found out that on the German map, if you have more than 4 people, the last and second to last people who, the 5th, 6th, whoever, get to pick a starting point, they're all screwed because all the cheap, good starting points are taken, and you have a wall around you of high, expensive places to expand through.
Yeah, and it's up to there's a mechanic whereby later in the game more people can expand into the same cities.
Yes,
it's an important skill for those people who are behind to be able to get into those cities first. They have to reverse that order in the second phase. If they do that successfully, they'll have a chance at winning.
Is there a way to speed up that second phase starting?
It goes pretty fast. I mean, it's just based on the number of cities or the level of the power plant. So churning through the power plants and cities. Having cities down. So just getting, sometimes I'll buy an extra city even though I won't be able to power it, right? If it becomes important. But I mean, in practice, you can't really make it faster than one or two turns faster than it normally would go.
Because I was stuck behind that wall for 3-4 turns. I expanded, filled everything, and then hit that wall for like 4 turns, and that's what killed me. That killed all momentum I had.
Yeah, that's normal. That's normal.
That was brutal. Okay. Now you had mentioned before we started there were a couple of games that you had played or not played or talked about not playing. I don't remember what that conversation was.
Well, I wanted to point out a couple of games that I was playing. I'll have you know that finally on Sunday, after the Geek Gab, the day after, I finally had my first loss at Terraforming Mars.
Oh, that's so terrible.
It shot my whole Sunday. But I wanted to make sure that I sent you a link to the entry on Board Game Geek.
Yes.
Terraforming Mars. So I was hoping that you'd put that in the show notes for people who are listening to check it out.
And did they add a note that you had your first loss on that in that article?
No.
You don't have a worldwide reputation? You're not ranked nationally?
Well, I mean, it was just for that weekend.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I've had other losses.
Oh, I see. Okay, I misunderstood. I'm like, does this bring down your ranking in the tournament play? Are you a lower seed now because of it?
I tell you what, if there were such a thing as competitive Terraforming Mars, I would probably join that tomorrow.
And the other game that you want me to put in the notes under the show, under the video, which I will, is Zia Legend of a Drift System, or is that Zia?
I wanted to mention it because it was sort of it's a space exploration game or a 4X game, and it's done on the board with big hexagonal tiles, and everybody's got their own spaceship, and they get to outfit their spaceship however they want. So I don't mention it because it's a good game. It's a little too long. There's a little too much downtime, and it's a little random. But if you want to sit down with a few of your friends and outfit some ships and go shooting each other with lasers or trading resources across different planets in the galaxy or mining rare minerals, that sort of thing. If you want to do that sort of flying around in space, doing that, space fun stuff, I recommend it. But it's for a certain type of gamer who is not me.
Just because it's too long, it has too much downtime?
Yeah, too long, too much downtime, a little too crazy and random.
See, in Power Grid, you have to actually pay attention during your opponent's turn. You have to know what they're doing. You can't just sit there.
Exactly. And Terraforming Mars is a good in between because it pays to see what your opponents are doing, but you can step away from the table for a few minutes and then come back and just look at the board state and see what's going on.
Weirdly enough, that brings me around to something I was discussing last night, which I won't jump into yet. If you have anything else that you want
to... Jump away.
Okay. So last night I went and saw Venom, and I went and saw Venom with 2 good friends of ours, Thomas and Brian.
Oh, good.
And then we hung out after Venom, and we were talking shop for a bit about the RPG I'm putting together.
Cool.
And it's part of a small part of the big secret project. So an entire role-playing game is a small part of the big secret project. So we were talking about difficulties that people run into in role-playing games. One of the difficulties they run into is downtime in combat. And we were talking about causes of that, what brings that to happen. And, maybe it's the rules are too complex. Maybe it's that the players don't know the rules. Maybe that it's difficult to know what you should be doing or what an optimal thing to be doing is. But one of the things I've noticed is when you're playing a game, it doesn't matter to you what the other person is doing right now, really. Fundamentally speaking, you don't have to pay attention to it.
Right.
And then there's that gap because player A has something big and awesome they can do in this combat. Player C has something big and awesome they might be able to do if the dice roll right, but player B really doesn't, so they're just kind of bored through the whole combat. And I think that contributes to boredom in combat and maybe slowing things down. So
that's an interesting perspective. I think that sounds like a common thing where in a game that has non-combat characters.
Exactly. So I have a couple of things I want to put into the rules of my game to give players a framework they can ameliorate that if they so choose. It's not mandatory. I'm not imposing anything, but one of the rules is if a player is ready to declare their actions within a minute, 1 minute, 60 seconds of the game master saying your turn, they get a bonus to whatever action they're going to take. If they're on the spot, if they already know what they're going to do, they get a bonus to that action. They can do it better.
Yeah, why not?
So,
I mean, while we're handing out bonuses.
Yeah, it's not mandatory. It's not punitive. But players who are paying attention, players who are ready to go, players who don't have to take 5 or 10 minutes to decide their next action, because, oh man, this also ties into something called the OODA loop, the Observe, Orient, Decide, and Act loop. Victory in a real-world combat does not go to the people who take time to study and pick the absolute perfectly most efficient action. Victory in combat goes to people who can do a good action right now and react faster than the enemy and keep them off balance. So
you've just given away the secret to how I play Street Fighter. all my friends are like, "Man, John, you're really good at this game," and I'm like, "If you say so." My rule is all offense all the time.
Yes. So absolutely. And in video games, if you have a choice of a power between defensive, healing, or offense, you go offense. Kill them first. So we reflect the reality of combat in the game by giving players who are willing to skip trying to find the most efficient, taking 10, 15, 20, half an hour to find the most efficient attack and make the best attack they can think of right now. They get a bonus because that's more effective than spending a bunch of time, wasting a bunch of time.
Right.
Okay.
And that's I don't know. Yeah, that's a good idea. That's something I learned a long time ago. And it's common at the RPG table for people to sort of want to think and talk and plan out. And frankly, that's not fun. It's fun to some people, but you get to a certain point where someone just has to take action. It's not always, there's always someone at the table that does that. Often it's me. But it's often there's always someone at the table who everybody's talking about what they want to do, and one guy finally gets fed up and looks at the DM and says, "I kick in the door."
So, the second thing that I think keeps people involved in is that the mechanics of the game are built such that it encourages teamwork. And here's how that works. In the course of a single round, player A does an action. It may be an attack, it may be a spell, or it may be something extra like a trick, throwing sand in someone's face or whatever, distracting the enemy. Whatever they choose to do, and there's 6 different skills that are each tied into different attributes. So the higher the attribute you always have one of these skills that you can do something in combat. How well you do on that check gives a bonus to your teammate on their next check, whatever they decide to do. And how well they do with your bonus in it gives a bonus to the next person. So
that's cool.
You have to make a plan. You have to say, okay, my trick is I'm going to try to get him to turn around, and then you can strike at his back while he's unprepared. You'll have a bonus to hit, maybe a bonus to damage if you can call your shot, whatever. It changes combat from a series of one-man silos who are doing what they do best, but no real interaction. And there's some couple of other mechanics that encourage teamwork. To every round, the group of players is making a plan as a team, and each individual person, even if they're not good in combat, has an option to do something that contributes materially to this chain of attacks that the group can put together. And so you're no longer just sitting there waiting for someone else to get done with their moment in the sun so you can get your moment in the sun or not. You're actually planning and preparing as a team what you're going to do to take down this bad guy or take down this group of bad guys. Everybody is invested in combat. Everybody has a role to play, even if it's not the big, physical attack. That fighter's big physical attack gets better because of other things everybody else can do, and everyone can contribute.
I like it. That's more of like that's a positive reinforcement of the behavior that you want to happen, which is a clever way of doing it.
So I've been working on those mechanics. Obviously, I've got to play test them, but initiative in the game is done as a group, and the better your group does, the better initiative they get. So they go first, and then they can also start getting bonuses, including morale attacks on the enemy if they're doing really, really good on the initiative, because that represents, again, what initiative is, the OODA loop, which is the more aggressive and the quicker you are, the more disconcerted, the more off balance, the more confused the enemy is, and that will and can break their morale and make them flee or panic or whatever. So you fight as a group to gain the initiative. You fight as a group to get bonuses, to do good attacks, to do better than you would otherwise, to take down bigger opponents than you would. And then there's another initiative using, and you know what the other initiative, supporters and things like that. I'll talk about that some other time. But when you're talking about this game, the Legends of Adrift system, obviously that's a competitive game, and I'm not trying to criticize the design of it, but that problem of boredom in combat I have noticed, and I'm trying to build in ways for players, especially creative players. The more creative you are as a player, the more options you have to earn initiative and seize initiative, and the more options you have to aid other players with your attacks. And it's all about the teamwork, so that every single round is a struggle to gain initiative points, to go first and to get benefits. And it's a team struggle. It's not an individual struggle.
I dig. I'm actually going to bring up Jeffro Johnson in the chat.
Yes.
Because he's been Jeffro, you've been listening to the show. He's been ranting about D&D Basic or BX. BX does have solution to these problems. No, it's a different solution that isn't very popular with gamers. But one of the solutions they do have team initiative, which was changed to individual initiative a long time ago in 2nd edition. they did a team initiative, but they also had this idea of a shot caller, which it's really different in RPGs, and it's the only way you can scale a role-playing game to have more than 4 people.
Yes.
More than 4 players, which is all the players, the DM gets a drink, right? All the players talk about what they want to do in the next turn. And then one guy says, all right, Game Master, here's what we're doing. And that's how you can scale lots of players in. That's how you keep people engaged, because as soon as all the planning's done as a team, then you just execute the combat. Move this guy, roll dice, roll dice, roll dice, go, go, go. Honestly, I tried it with my D&D group, and they hated it. They hated the shot caller thing. They just wanted to take individual actions. So that's something I think you want to establish at the outset of your game session. Or if you're, I don't know, writing your own RPG, something you set up, you build in as part of the rules. Like, here are the rules. Combat is a team thing. This is how we play the game. Everybody at the table comes together and they talk about what they're going to do.
And I should note this: combat initiative itself. If you haven't seized the initiative yet, if nobody has more initiative points as a faction, it goes according to dexterity or perception from high to low. So people who are more dexterous or more perceptive go first, less third, fourth. And so you'll have heroes and villains being intermixed. One hero, one villain, 2 heroes, another, and so on and so forth. And the benefit of gaining the initiative is your faction goes through their order first. And so, and the other thing, the benefit of, say, establishing an ambush is you get a surprise action round before the enemy goes at all. And if you do good in that, you'll have initiative points. And so you'll get initiative beginning in the next round. So you get 2 full action stacks before the enemy can react at all. It's brutal. Ambushes are brutal. So, yeah. A lot to think about there, a lot to play test, but all of these problems I'm thinking about all the time and trying to come up with solutions and put them together. So that's a little bit of a peek behind the scenes at the design of my new RPG, some of the different things I'm trying to put in place.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to, and I'm gonna go a little bit more on that whole idea of positive reinforcement, because you ran a game called Tour for us.
Yes.
And there's only one thing I really liked about it, and that was all the players get cards that they can use to affect the outcome of actions.
Mm-hmm.
In order to play those cards, you have to interact with the game and with the other players.
Yes, with the game world. Yes,
with the game world. So that sort of positive reinforcement, like, sorry, John, you can't play that +2 skill card. You actually have to provide an in-game action or in-game reason why you're helping. That's great. And I enjoy rules that encourage people to get into the game. I like that. I prefer that positive reinforcement aspect. It's the same thing, to get extra nerdy. It's the same thing when I'm designing programs or systems at work. When I prefer to design a program or a system that encourages, that generates the results I want. Instead of, hard coding, forcing square pegs into round holes. I want to encourage the behavior that I want to see in the end, if that makes sense.
One of the things that 3rd edition stressed was system mastery. And I don't want to get in the argument about that. I just want to point something out. You engage with the rules and you learn the rules and they give you bonuses and you do better. That's system mastery. One of the things that the Drama deck in Torg and other similar options are not system mastery, which, again, I'm not criticizing. I'm not saying that's completely wrong. That's completely orthogonal. It's a completely different discussion. It's a distraction from the point I'm about to make. So set that aside for just a second. It encourages taking the game world as a world and asking, what is it I can do with the resources my character has or would have available? I'm in a room. Are there fire extinguishers? Are there chairs? Are there flagons full of mead? Are there you know, distracted bystanders. What is the reality of this world? Can you describe it to me, Game Master? And then I use those elements that are present to make my attacks or my other actions more effective. And that's what allows me to play this drama deck card to get a bonus, is because I identify concrete elements of the world, I accept the reality of the world, and then I take the action and I get the bonus. And I will say this, yes, this game does have cards like the drama deck. I took a lot of inspiration from Torg. It's completely different from Torg, but it does have cards like that, and those are the exact rules that apply to them. Is in order to gain a bonus from the card, you just describe, okay, there's lots of bystanders running around crazy, they're panicky. I'm going to step out of the crowd suddenly and attack from a direction they're not expecting because I'm using the crowd as cover. Now I can play this card, which gives me a bonus. It's not system mastery because the system is pretty simple. You've got a card. You get a +3 to attack. It is, if you can describe what you're doing, it is engaging with the world as a world and using your imagination and coming up with creative solutions. So that's exactly exactly how it works.
All right. Well, yeah. I'm excited about the whole project. So, DW.
Yes.
I heard you went and saw a movie.
Yes, I did. I saw the whole movie. There are 2 after-credit scenes, one of which was completely unexpected, and I'm going to blow this because it's not actually a spoiler for the movie. It has nothing to do with the movie. The last after-credit scene, after the end of all the credits, is like a 2-minute clip from the new Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse animated movie Sony's releasing on Christmas.
There's an animated Spider-Man coming out?
Yes, there's an animated Spider-Man movie coming out called Into the Spider-Verse. It's about all of these alternate Spider-Mans from alternate universes whose paths crossed, and they've got to take on something that I don't know what the original comic series is about, and I don't know what they will make it about in the movie. But there's Peter Parker, there's Miles Morales from the Ultimate Spider-Man universe, there's Gwen, Spider-Gwen, which is she comes from a universe where Gwen Stacy got bit instead of Peter Parker. There is Peter Porker, the spectacular Spider-Ham, who's from a comedic anthropomorphic animal universe. Absolutely, I'm not making this up. This is literally in a trailer available on YouTube right now.
Oh, no.
There is a dark Spider-Man from a pulp universe where he wears a trench coat and a fedora and stuff and has pulp gadgets in addition to some spider powers. There is apparently a anime girl Spider-Man with a mech suit, maybe, I'm not sure. And there's probably some others that I didn't see in the trailers and don't really know about. All of them come together to do something. That's the movie. It's coming out in Christmas. So you spend the last 2 minutes. The last after credit scene is 2 minutes. In the movie. So that's the second after credit scene. If you want to see it, you can stay after the whole credits run. And I counted individually. There are roughly 500,000 individual computer animators listed for this movie. It was difficult. I had to count very, very quickly, but I am pretty sure it was in the vicinity of 500,000 computer animators, which is impressive, I think. And then there was Venom, the movie, with Tom Hardy. He's a great actor, yeah. And I've liked him better in every other role I've ever seen him in.
Oh.
And so I will say this: my biggest complaint about the Venom movie was that the Venom costume looked dumb. I thought it looked stupid. I thought it looked wet, and I mean, it did. It glistened with this high sheen, so it looked wet or oily. And maybe the best thing I can say about the movie is that the Venom symbiote and the Venom suit did not look as completely stupid as I thought it was going to. It wasn't as bad as I thought it would be, the special effects. Is that a ringing endorsement?
So tell us about the story. What was the story?
I went and saw Rampage. Did you see Rampage? Of course you did.
Yes, of course I did.
Because we reviewed it on the show.
Indeed.
Do you remember the very first scene of Rampage?
Oh. I don't remember anything about that film.
Because you'll see where I'm going as soon as I ask you that question. The very first scene of Rampage is space station in space, canisters of sciencey stuff on the space station.
Yes, now I recall.
Crew emergency, and the space station crashes to Earth, and the stuff in the canisters gets out.
Okay.
Rampage. That's how it starts. Would you care to bet how Venom starts?
Is it in space?
It starts in space. In a spaceship, not a space station. So the differences already are huge. Huge differences between the two. And the spaceship crashes to Earth. And there are canisters of sciencey stuff, but instead of all of them breaking open and getting out, only one does. So you can immediately see the vast and consequential differences between Rampage and Venom. They are absolutely not at all the same. It was a spaceship, not a space station, and it wasn't all the canisters, it was only one. So by gum and by golly, I will be physically upset if people claim that Venom was ripping off Rampage. Completely implausible for people to claim that. Moreover, the second scene in the movie had someone in an ambulance, and the ambulance crashes in the middle of a forest and flips over, and a character gets out of the ambulance, and, superhuman-y things are involved. The fact that this was almost exactly the same as a scene in Tom Cruise's The Mummy, it is absolutely not exactly the same in every single detail.
Oh, God.
For one thing, the ambulance in Tom Cruise's movie was like an off-whitish or brownish color, and the ambulance in this movie is yellow. Completely different. So nobody say they're exactly the same. There is literally minor differences throughout. And
so are you trying to maybe imply that these Hollywood scriptwriters are just sort of piecing together a bunch of stuff that's already been written before?
I would not be the sort to directly imply that. I am saying exactly the opposite. They are completely, utterly original, and this movie is absolutely not reminiscent of every single paranoid, mind control alien movie from the last 100 years. If you remember that Ryan Reynolds was in a movie with a creature from space who they stuck in a jar and experimented on and tested until it broke loose and became a monster and killed everybody aboard the space station. That's a movie we reviewed in the last year. Absolutely, completely different. When this movie has a monster that's kind of shapeless and formless, that's in a glass cage, and they experiment on it, and then it escapes and wreaks damage. Completely different.
Totally not the same script. No, I can see the differences for sure.
And all those movies where you have some sort of space parasite that gets out and infects people's bodies, and they get taken over by aliens and become alien, and physically change like John Carpenter's The Thing. Well, that was absolutely not identical to all those things.
Well, that was really specific. Why would you mention The Thing?
That's a good movie. It's been on my mind. I haven't seen it in a long time.
And yes, just about all of those movies are very derivative of it. You know what they should do? Theaters should just stop playing these films and just say, you know what, we were going to show Venom because it's the hot new Marvel property, but you know what, we're going to save a lot of money and we're just going to show John Carpenter's The Thing again.
Now, Venom is made by Sony Pictures. And on Twitter, I posted that I had gone back 10 years. It may have been 11, it may have been 9. I don't remember the exact duration. I went back and looked at every single of the 100 films Sony has produced in the last 10 years.
Oh, wow. I'm sorry.
Every single one. And there was 2 movies out of 100 and something that were good. The rest were uniformly awful.
That's not the first time I've heard that.
Literally every movie Sony has produced for a decade has been disastrously bad. And one of the movies I counted as not being awful was White House Down, which was okay. It wasn't great, but it wasn't completely awful. And I believe the other one that wasn't awful was maybe Heartbreak Ridge or something like it. It was a good prestige picture.
That's pretty damning. I mean, Sony Pictures basically comes out with garbage every time.
Every single time. And Heartbreak Ridge wasn't even a Sony picture. Mel Gibson got the script. Mel Gibson directed it. Mel Gibson produced it. And he only went to Sony after the movie was done and said, I need a distributor. And they said, okay.
And that was a great film. If I could make an aside, I mean, it's a war movie, and people don't really make war movies anymore. They're not extremely popular genre, but that was a great war film.
Right. Heartbreak Ridge, great movie. I actually actively endorse everyone go see it. It's an awesome movie, and it shows you how good Andrew Garfield can be and how much he was wasted in the coincidentally Sony Spider-Man movies.
Which was a huge. You know, I know that we have to reboot these superheroes every once in a while. I'm glad Batman got a reboot, but let's be honest here. Sam Raimi did the best Spider-Mans, and
I think so.
And Sam Raimi was born to play superhero movies. He got started in horror, and the only reason he got started with horror is because they were cheap to make, and all of his college buddies wanted to make one.
Yeah.
The man is a great. He's just a great superhero movie. He finally came into his own when he did Darkman, which I'm showing my age now. But Darkman was a great film, and it just showed everybody, oh, this is what he's supposed to do. Hire him to make Spider-Man. There's no reason to make other crappy Spider-Man. Spiders-Men.
So, is Venom a completely awful movie? No, it's not a completely awful movie. It's not a terrible movie. It's just not terribly good.
And it's bad enough that we've been talking about other movies this whole time.
It is not a movie that is, fundamentally speaking, it's not a movie that is either, I don't know if they're not conversant with or they're not comfortable with heroes and heroism. It is schizophrenic. The characterization of the Venom symbiote doesn't make sense from one scene to another.
So are you saying that it doesn't have any clear motivation?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't have any clear motivation. And what motivation it has just changes at random for no reason that makes sense. No reason that
unless you understand that the motivation needs to change for the purposes of the script.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a big problem.
He plays Eddie Brock in a really strange way that I'm sure may be appealing as an actor because it's highly unusual and lets him get away from some of the characters he's played in other times and other places. And yeah, it's interesting. They did a decent job, not a super great job. It's not obviously fake a lot of the time. Most of the time, it's not obviously fake. It's just. It's okay. There's a lot of action, and if you can overlook the fact that the hero isn't really heroic, and what the symbiote doesn't make any sense, and why it looks the way it doesn't make any sense, and why what the plan of the eventual bad guy doesn't make any sense, and how the Venom and Eddie Brock combination become sort of a really, really evil anti-hero to fight the eventual bad guy. You accept that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. If you can get past all that, there's action, they drive fast, things get blown up. There's really cool fights that use the Venom powers interestingly. And also overlook the fact that there's a lot of cliches in the movie. Tell me if you've heard this one before. There is a bold and brilliant, but personally a little bit self-destructive, crusading reporter who is told that their station is hanging by a thread. And all they have to do to save their job and to save the station is to go out and interview this one guy. If they do a puff piece interview of this one guy, everything in their life will be fine. And then the crusading reporter goes out, and what do?
I'm guessing they don't do that.
Exactly. Because that's what happens. Every single time this kind of character is trotted out. That's what they do.
This is not sounding good, man.
So he gets fired. He gets blackballed apparently from any and all employment in the city, including fry cooks and dishwashers. This rich person he offended.
Oh, wow, that was fast.
Blackballs him from every job. And his fiancée gets fired because he's a reporter and he snuck into her computer, and her law firm works for the bad guy's company. They represent the bad guy. And so she had some confidential information on her computer, and he snuck into her computer and got some confidential information that he can't actually use because he can't substantiate it or corroborate it without revealing that he broke the law.
And that this makes them the bad guys, that they're gonna shut someone down and fire someone for breaking into their systems. Is that
Yes.
what they're going with? That somehow makes you bad.
And so he gets his girlfriend fired from her law firm. And then literally they show this. They have him go into the his editor, who says, "Hey, can you corroborate this?" And he has to sit there and say, "No, I can't," because he can't corroborate it, because he broke in and read a document, a brief he wasn't supposed to, about a wrongful death lawsuit. There's a wrongful death lawsuit against the owner of a major medical / space exploration company, a complex of companies. You're sending rockets into space with people aboard them, and you're conducting human trials for dozens of medications, and some people died. Completely evil. Proves evil. And he can't use any of this information, so it does him no good. He blew up his entire life for no good reason. Not only is it dumb, it's a cliche. It's maybe the most cliched cliche of all the cliches. In fact, I think that was a plot point 2 or 3 years ago in South Park, where the crusading school newspaper published something that the administration told him not to, and his newspaper got shut down. I think Jimmy the reporter did that. And so that's how cliched it is South Park makes fun of it.
I'm glad you got that one. I'm not a South Park viewer.
So, yeah. It's a cliche, and there's a lot of cliches. There's this lady.
It just sounds like it's a bunch of lazy writing, honestly.
At one point, they're introducing the science team, and this kind of odd and idiosyncratic lady is introduced. And as soon as she came on screen, literally, it's literally happened in real life, I leaned over to my friend Thomas and says, "She dies horribly at some point."
Well, I mean, that's pretty easy for this kind of movie, if it's a monster movie.
But all the other scientists in the lab, none of them died horribly. But her, that one specific character, does in point of fact die horribly at some point in the movie.
Well, it's going to happen.
I called it. So, yeah. I'm not saying this is a terribly bad movie.
It doesn't sound like a terribly bad movie. It just sounds like a generic by-the-numbers monster / anti-hero movie, and either you want to go see that or you don't.
Exactly. That's precisely it. It's generic and by the numbers. There's not a lot of thought put into it to make it stand out.
That's too bad. With such a great actor as a lead, a charismatic guy, and a guy who's been known to put forth amazing performances of a villain behind a mask.
Yep.
Is a awful misuse of Tom Hardy.
I mean, I don't have a lot else to say about them. If you're going to say me, "Oh, should I go pay money to see it?" I said, well, it's generic. It's okay. It's decent. If you can overlook the cliches and unintended or intentional, I don't know, pieces that are similar to those from other movies, then yeah, go see it. I mean, it's all right. It's okay. It's not bad. It doesn't insult your intelligence. It doesn't do a whole lot of, or hardly, it doesn't preach at you. It doesn't stop for, 5 minutes so they can rail against President Trump. The main villain isn't a stand-in for any obvious political figure. In fact, the main villain is not an old white man.
No.
I'm putting it out there. The main villain is not an old white man.
In the current year, get out of here.
And so, you know, they're not building this cliche by the numbers according to some ideological template. They're building it according to the tropes of monster movies and some superhero movies and stuff like that. So it's I mean, he lives in San Francisco. He's a reporter in San Francisco. Apparently he's like a modern day gonzo news reporter like Howard W. Hunter, only he does it on the air for this local station. And so they mention, protest stations and resist for just like a couple of frames. And then they immediately go to, we think the mayor of city council and the mayor of San Francisco and the city council suck. That's the next thing we see is this old, protester lady telling us how the mayor of San Francisco sucks. So it's not a dig against Trump. It's a dig just against the kind of crap that goes on in San Francisco. He's going to be covering it, of course. They're going to talk about Trump, but they're also talking about how bad other things are.
Right. No, that's reasonable. Just, yeah, politicians suck. Yeah, we all know that. Or like that reminds me of Ghostbusters. The villain was the city council. It's like idiots in government. It doesn't have to be a particular person.
And it was just this montage of news stories from him doing reporting. And so he's just reporting on the things that happen in San Francisco. Those happen to be a couple of them. And the point of the montage is that homeless people have been disappearing suspiciously and showing up in the landfill, and nobody knows why. But they think that maybe it has something to do with this, kind of Elon Musk-ish character. So okay. I feel like maybe I should give a recommendation for a certain group of people because they will probably love it and like it. And the audience in the movie theater seem to love it or like it. I just can't recommend it because I couldn't love it or like it. I felt like watching the last half of the movie, I was completely divorced from the thrill ride that the directors wanted me to be on. And I was just looking at it dispassionately and disconnected and analytically because the movie had thrown me out of being emotionally involved with it. I was just sitting back and watching it happen and thinking about it and analyzing it, but that wasn't the same reaction that most of the audience have. When the movie was over, some of the audience cheered and clapped and stuff. People seem to really love there's this, and it's a really well done scene. It's a cool scene. He's on a motorcycle. He's got the Venom virus, symbiote, parasite. He's driving through the city and the bad guys are chasing him and he's doing all these. He's not doing anything because he doesn't know exactly what's going on. The Venom parasite keeps on doing all these things to keep him alive. Like he drives past this car, it rips the door off the car and throws it in back of them just in time to catch an explosion so they don't get killed. It grabs a hold of two things and propels the bike. At one point, the bike needs to make a sharp corner, so the Venom symbiote throws itself out into this patch on the ground and then has this strong tendril attached to him and whips him around this corner impossibly fast and then gloops back onto him. And the bad guys are looking all stunned. They're like, what the hell was that?
Yeah. Sounds freaking cool.
It was a cool chase scene. I'm not lying. And they don't stop for long, boring things. There's always something going on. And I feel like for a large portion of the movie-going audience, they'll like the movie. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying you won't like it. Despite all the negative things I said earlier, I don't feel like I can truly claim that my reaction will be the same for everybody, but it was my reaction because I just was thrown out of it so much because I've seen these cliches play out for, over 30 years. I've seen these things again and again and again, but it's possible that teenagers or young adults may not have seen all the movies I've seen, so they're not cliches to them because they're brand new. They're fresh. They're still exciting.
Yeah, that's fair.
And so I'm really trying to be fair with this one. I'm really trying to give the movie, to present my verdict of the movie in the context of how I approach it, and to give people a fair warning that they may approach it differently and they may enjoy this movie a lot more than I did. And if they do, then go see it. If it sounds like you like all this action, there's this really cool fight scene in a building where there's a bunch of cops who have cornered him, SWAT officers. They have guns and shields and stuff. And there's a lot of clowns going on. And he has this cool multi-level battle with them where he's going up and down and jumping to ledges and throwing cops around, and it's cool. It's a cool fight scene. If I had been into the movie at that point, I would have found it really thrilling. That's in there. There are lots of things like that in there. It just didn't reach me because I had already been pushed out of it by just being really
old and jaded,
but also at the same time kind of quizzical about what the hell they were doing with the symbiote. The symbiote, his speech patterns and the things he says are really weird. It's like they're halfway going for some inhuman alien thing, but halfway going for like a modern, hip, cynical, snarky thing, and it didn't mesh well with me. So, but I'm not saying you'll hate this movie. I'm not even saying you should hate this movie. Given all these caveats, it's not a terrible movie. It's just not terribly good. It's really generic, but if you like this kind of movie, I think you'll probably like Venom. That's what I'm trying to say, as I've been repeating myself for the past 10 minutes. That's what I've been saying over and 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 over again for 10 minutes.
Yeah, man.
But
I hear you. It sounds like it's generic, lazily written schlock.
It really is. Woody Harrelson has a surprise cameo.
Well, you just ruined the surprise. Thanks a lot, man.
Yep. It was kind of interesting when he showed up. I thought his cameo was amusing. It was funny. It tickled my funny bone. Oh, by the way, his girlfriend, when she dumps him, she goes off and get a new boyfriend.
Okay.
He's not a jackass.
Oh, of course.
He's not an asshole. You don't hate him. They don't make him out to be a bad guy. He's a good guy. He's a doctor. He does everything he can to help out Tom Hardy. That's kind of unusual in a movie like this. This is the one non-lazy choice they made, maybe, is they make this doctor an actually good guy. He's concerned. He's caring. He goes out of his way to try and help Tom Hardy, to bring him into the hospital and stuff. So normally in a movie like this, they would make the boyfriend a gigantic jerk, or one of those guys who's really, really happy and friendly, but in a really jerky way. And so they didn't do that.
Sympathize with the protagonist, of course.
Yeah, you want to make you sympathize with Tom Hardy's character, so we'll make the new boyfriend a jerk, so you can, sneer at it when he gets killed later or whatever. Minor spoiler, they don't do that. They don't kill this guy off so you'll feel better for Tom Hardy. They don't make him into a massive jerk hole. So there's one at least non-lazy thing they did in the movie. They stick the symbiote in a room at one point, and you immediately think you can't have him trapped in that room because it's going to get out easily. And then like 30 seconds later, it gets out easily.
Uh-huh.
They thought that through. There are several points in the plot is not randomly assembled. They do think things through in several ways. And yes, the tropes and the vocabulary and the language is kind of lazy, but they did not leave obvious gaping consequential holes in the narrative. At one point, Tom Hardy and the Venom symbiote get separated, and then later they get back together, and how that sequence of events occurs, where the symbiote gets from where he was to being back with Tom Hardy, makes perfect sense. Its actions, the actions of every creature or character involved, and what it does makes perfect sense and follows absolutely logically. You cannot fault that. This is not a bad movie. This is not a terrible movie. I just saw Predator, The Predator. That was a terrible movie. That was a movie with massive gaping plot holes and strange jumps in logic. This movie doesn't do that. So there are good things about this movie, even though I'm kind of focused on the bad. There are good things to recommend about this movie. It's not an awful movie. It's just not awfully good. And I say that for good reason. All right, I'm done. I think I'm done. I think I'm said everything I want to say.
I think we are done.
Do you have anything else you want to talk about before you take off?
Oh, that's about it on my plate. It has been a pleasure to speak with you and hang out with Jeffro and the crew in chat talking about games.
I appreciate everybody who came and listened to the show live. Thanks for being involved in the chat and discussing like D&D and Marvel Comics and all these other topics that the side discussions always have. If you want to come and watch us live, by all means, do so. The chat is always highly energetic. And thanks to YouTube's new stuff from the last couple of months, you can even read the chat, though not participate, after the show's over. I'm going to add some links to the couple of board games that Dornall was discussing earlier, so you guys can go check them out on Board Game Geek. Decide if they are worth it for you. I appreciate everyone who's listening live or who is listening to this show later. We are available on youtube.com/Geek Gab. We are also available on the iTunes store. We are also available on the Google Play Store. And we are also available on soundcloud.com. Do a search for Geek Gab. You can subscribe to us and listen to this show on the platform of your choice. If you're on YouTube, by all means, like it. If you like the video, subscribe and be sure to ring the bell. I am told that's the term that all the hip new YouTubers are using. Be sure to ring the bell so you can get immediate announcements when shows like this are going live. This is Geek Gab. We are here about every week, about every Saturday at this time. Next week, we have John Mollison, a member of the Pulp Revolution and a Pulp author who is releasing a new book. He's going to be coming on the show to discuss his new book next week at this time. But until then, we are leaving you bereft. But don't you worry. Don't you fret. We will be back.